Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome to the Total Party Greenhouse. Neighbors have been yelling at their dogs for a little bit, and so recording a video on the porch doesn't seem to be in the cards today. But, I've been talking a lot of positive things about Palladium games and mentioning other game systems I approve of, and all this hubbub about, people kind of stepping away from Dungeons and Dragons in spite of the supposed victory with the OGL yesterday. There still seems to be a strong sentiment of people who have kind of, had their fill of Wizards of the Coast and their products. I mean, let's also not forget what they had just had happen with Magic the Gathering, and that there's still all this, potential weird changes that'll happen to the role-playing game hobby. If the virtual tabletop, is set into place and actually takes off and then becomes what the public perceives D&D to be as, the years wear on into the future and all that. People are looking for other game systems, and why am I talking you into playing Palladium books when I could be talking you into playing my own? For some reason, it seems almost like committing some sort of social faux pas to talk about my own products on my own goddamn YouTube channel. I guess I'm just supposed to sit around and wait magically for some larger YouTuber to come along and decide to, on their own plug the thing. Otherwise, I'm just, paying them to be a shill to do a paid product placement, or, they get to have a free copy of the book in order to entice them into wanting to review it so they don't have to be a proper paying customer like everyone else. Which, there's truth to the psychology that if you pay for something, you actually feel a bit more invested in it and will take it a bit more seriously than something that's just handed to you for free. But, just for the sake of alienating one or two of you, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the entry-level games I have. I've had not just written a bunch of stuff, but I have several individual game lines, all using my rule system. My rule system is super easy to learn. You could have character creation explained and done in a matter of minutes, making your session 0 into a session 1, since you will get to spend 90 to 95% of your time with your players on that first time playing the game, instead of having to, go through everyone taking their turn with the one player's handbook and going back and forth and reading through all the spells and all that kind of shit, but just for them to be able to make up their mind as to what they want. My stuff get people into the action real quick. None of the concepts are like out of this world, super original, and that's a good thing. Role playing games rely on a lot of common shared assumptions, and the more that you and your players all can get your heads around the concept, the better and the easier it is to move on and have fun and throw the twists in later, not just with the initial setup. I'm not going to talk about a couple of my more satirical games. You might not be cool enough for Escape from Planet Matriarchy or Amazon Time Barbarians or even Ghosts of the Shadow Zone, so I'll leave those as the subject for another day, or perhaps for you to on your own to decide if you have what it takes to handle the sort of biting commentary that's buried in those tomes. But these, I say, are the entry-level games in that, they have what I would think is the most mass market appeal in terms of the concepts and what players get to play. The key is these are things that are supposed to be fun concepts. You can get your head around them, and will provide an emphasis on having memorable experiences, to look back upon. There a lot of these games will, if you play them out as intended, will lead to some very interesting scenarios and such. That should stand out and make them unique, and not just I fought 27 kobolds in a dungeon today, and all that kind of boring shit. For the cheapskates out there, I'm going to talk about my cheapest book first. It's not very common. Every once in a while you see some comment of $14 for a book that has rules I know nothing about. I don't know. That seems kind of steep. Look, guys, my wife thinks I'm massively undercharging for everything. She thinks I should be charging people the same amount of money that D&D charges people for their books, which, from my point of view as a lifelong gamer, I'm no one's gonna fly for that. I don't have a bunch of fancy art. I don't have a whole editorial department. I don't have a bunch of contracted ghostwriters. They're entirely a product of my own imagination and love and care and all that kind of stuff. And I try to lean into that and go with the aesthetic quality that these are pulp books, with pulp concepts for pulp people. So anyway, the first one, the cheapest one, is Cowgirls versus Zombies. You don't want to pay much. You're not going to get much. You get the basic scenario concept of what's going on and a few suggestions of what to do with it. Character creation, the barest minimum amount of rules needed to actually run the thing and understand how ghosts work and the possession of bodies and all that kind of stuff. And the rest I leave up to you. I'm not a big fan of the zombie genre, so I just really didn't have it in me to go and write a bunch of random scenarios that you could use. You can come up with zombie encounters, and you can decide whether or not you want to go with the simplified, they're just all a bunch of, brainless undead that you just got to survive, or if you want to have something a bit more advanced and you find out that the ghosts that are inhabiting the dead are part of some larger weird agenda, and that a lot of these people are savable, and so your characters can become heroes and stop this terrible thing that's going on in Colorado in the year 1866. And it doesn't have if you want a bunch of detailed information about what life was like back then and there, you're gonna have to do it yourself. That's what you get for $3 as a PDF, or you can get it in print for a little bit more. Generally, most of my PDFs on drive-thru are about $5 to $10 cheaper than what you're asked if you want to get the print copies, depending also on whether or not it's paperback or hardcover, because man, they jack up the printing costs if you want a hardcover. Next, also going with the ladies kind of characters, we got Lady Spy Detective. The concept behind it was a game that a game master can play with their wife or girlfriend or whatever their partner is that would enjoy playing a 1950s Lady Spy Detective. You can everything from Alfred Hitchcock kind of noir mysteries to James Bond kind of snark. Big spy missions, localized crime. It's all possible through this. Characters are first wave feminist characters in the middle of the 1950s, very Mad Men. You get to actually overcome sexism and all that kind of stuff. International characters. Instead of having a bunch of specific real world spy organizations and intelligence bureaus and such, I kind of leave it where it's generically formatted types of agencies, and then that way if you want to make one up for the country of origin for your player character, or if you want to make it based on a real world institution, that's on you. But also not all that much out of pocket. It's $6 for the PDF just to get the main rule book. There's also a bundle version for Valentine's Day that includes some of the source books, including a nice thick book full of sample missions called Lady Spy Detective Mission Profiles. Next up, possibly my most popular book would be Expedition to Ancient Egypt. Do you like Brendan Fraser's first 2 mummy movies? Well, that's the entirety of the pitch you got to give to your players to get them to make some characters. They're members of a expedition in the year 1911 heading to Thebes in southern Egypt for a magazine called International Geographer's Quarterly, being run by a guy by the name of Lord Mahoney. And the initial scenario of the game is that, they get sent hurtling back in time to the year, I believe it's 1054 BC. And from that point out, it's basically a survival horror game. They're not going to know how to talk to anybody unless it occurs to one of the players to take, ancient Egyptian as one of the languages they speak. And there's no prompting to suggest to people to do that. It's entirely just kind of on the player's own intelligence to think of it. So they're going to spend weeks to months trying to figure out just how to communicate with the natives. And, it's a fantasy version of ancient history. So, there's going to be ghoulies and crawlies and all sorts of things that go bump in the night for them to encounter and try to eventually figure out how the hell they're supposed to get back to their own time, which there are things, on how to do that in here. It's got the most source books. It's got a big source book, goes into much greater detail about the magic system. a source book that details the history and the weird stuff going on with the Sphinx in the setting. It's not just like dark fantasy. There's like heavy ancient aliens kind of overtones going on with this too, because not all the fantasy creatures are supernatural in origin. Some of them are literal aliens, such as the vampires in my setting, which are more like parasites that have like mutated. And you can read all about it if you're so inclined. You know what vampires are like though. It's also got a couple of adventure modules. The Curse of Lord Mahoney's Fedora is not just an introductory adventure. It kind of helps teach someone who's new to the Total Party system how to run it, and gives you just kind of like a full kind of opening chapter to help get your player character started based on the opening scenario in the main book. And then there's Ancient Egypt Conquers Mars, which is for characters after they've gained their feet under them a little bit, and you want to throw something at them they're not expecting, and then they suddenly discover that there's this whole Bronze Age science fiction stuff going on Mars, with Olympian gods living on Olympus Mons, and sirens, cyclops, centaurs, all that kind of good stuff. So check that out. For more traditional sci-fi, it started off as a source book for Escape from Planet Matriarchy, but the scenario seems so self-contained. I went ahead and just threw rules in it anyway, so you can use it as just a standalone book. I would also recommend Rocket Cadets in the 11th Dimension. You as a game master get to have a specific NPC, which is the cadet instructor on the starship that you also get to design. And then the players are space cadets on a mission where they get lost in the 11th Dimension, if you couldn't tell by the title. It's little Spelljammer-esque. There's a lot of, Flash Gordon in there, little Buck Rogers, some historical characters pop up. I enjoy it. People who've read it enjoy it. And you might enjoy it too if you're into such things. It's a retro sci-fi kind of vibe, if you're looking for that kind of science fiction look as portrayed in Fallout. Or, what was that other game that Obsidian put out? It's not Forbidden Worlds. It's something like that. Anyway, though, it's got that, like I said, it's got that retro 1950s idea of what the future would look like with rocket ships and all that kind of stuff and flying saucers. So, next, Pax Luporum. I'm kind of sad at times that Pax Luporum doesn't do better, because to me it's my most serious game. It's the one game that there's really no satirical edge to it. It's just me presenting a game set in Rome in the year 250 BC, when they're still in the Roman Republic, quite a ways before the Empire. And there's just the basic conceit is that all the actual ethnic Romans are werewolves. And it gives you a bunch of tribes. There's also rules for playing Olympic gods or mer people. You can also optionally have ghosts and humans as player characters. It's got a couple of setting source books for it so far. There's one for Sicily. It's right in the middle of the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage. So you can have all sorts of war and politics going on in the Sicilian setting. I also had just put this out in the last 2 weeks. In the midst of all this chaos over the OGL, I've completely forgotten to really plug it at all. But the second setting source book for Pax Luporum, Adventures on Lesbos, is set in the Eastern Aegean Sea, a bit more removed from the immediate conflict going on in southern Italy and Sicily right now. To a point where there's so much character creation and kind of standalone stuff going on in it. You can use it, with Pax Luporum or just as a standalone source book if you happen to have picked up the Total Party System Rules Handbook, which is also available now if you just want the rule system, and so that you can use it for your own ends and not deal with any of my weird-ass scenarios. That's also available too. I will leave a link below to my Drive-Thru RPG page. You can use that to peruse titles and read about them. If you do not want the PDF and you'd rather have a print copy, go to Amazon, search for the title. You might have to plug in the name R. Joshua Holland, because that's who wrote it, because that's me. Anyway, so on that note, enjoy your weekend. Get what satisfaction you can out of what little amount of blood we managed to squeeze from that stone that is Wizards of the Coast over this whole OGL nonsense. And I'm not offering you trash here. It recreates something that the OSR games can't actually recreate about the original D&D days, and that is the seat of your pants, untested, room for argument kind of stuff that was going on with the original D&D that you can't get in an OSR game that still has 40 years plus of playtesting informing everything that they're doing with it when they wrote it. This is real easy to use, but yeah, it doesn't have 50 years of people playing it and finding everything that's wrong with it and trying to poke at all the corners. You're welcome. It gives you something to do. I haven't put down rules for what happens if you walk into a fiery building or if someone tries to drown your character. I've thought of it. I know what I would do if that situation were to come up when running one of these games. But how you would want to approach it, well, that's for you to decide. And so, until next time, stay waspinated.